Okay. So are we back to BDUF? I think that's a question to you.
I'm happy to respond to that.
Okay.
Here is, well, I've already said that something that takes 100 pages of traditional spec should be down to less than 5. So what we're talking about here is a maximum of 1/20th of waterfall documentation. But it's even more than that in some circumstances. For example, a German company building a FDA certified medical device had 12,000 pages. After 6 months of Scrum, they had 800, 80% automated, and it was going to 300, 80% automated. So 20% of that is like 60 pages handwritten. So 60 over like 1,000th, we're talking about 1,000th of the documentation. That's what Agile means. How is that big upfront design?
Well, to get this level, to condense the information in this way, so that really the guys, as you said before, do not need to speak anymore to each other. So the team with the product owner, to get it done in that way, might take also a long time, a lot of efforts to get the information condensed so strongly.
Well, it's certainly true that the product owner's job is a big job, and in my company now we have 2 product owners for a team of 7. Because the team is so fast to keep up with them, you know, they're burning a couple hundred stories a week. Now they're small stories because the team, to go fast, gets them smaller and smaller. So they're, you know, on the order average a day. Used to average a day, now they're a lot less. So it does take a lot of work, but it's still, I would say, on the order of 5% of what, in the aggregate, you know, for the whole project, you add up all the design, I think it's still 5% of a typical waterfall. Yeah.
In this case, the 60 pages handwritten, are these written by one team or one design team and then handed over to another team that is actually doing the development, or is it the same team that is just doing the documentation and then just giving to someone else? What is this 60 pages there?
Well, you know, there's several levels of design. There's the world-class designer that says, okay, here's, if you want to compete against Apple, you better do your product in this way, and comes up with a lot of examples, with a lot of feedback from the company, and it's probably somebody outside your company because most companies don't have people of that caliber. Now, once that concept is there, then you wind up with typically usability kind of designers inside the company that are really implementing it. And they're probably doing a lot of work with the product owners and also with the team to explain. One of the big web companies I work with that had hundreds of web developers and build many of the big sites in the United States, they had a design division that not only did work for them, but it actually worked for other companies. So that was a service product for them, design. And the way we worked up the strategy, the design expert said, you know, we need the teams to iterate 3 times before we can go live with a web page. So we'll come in we'll work with the product owners. Remember, a product owner usually doesn't have the talent to do everything. So these design people are typically not the product owner, because the product owner doesn't have that level of skill. But a good product owner knows when he needs design, and he gets somebody on his team to execute it. And so that's what would happen in this company. Get the design experts over, working the backlog, and they would come up with a design of the web pages at the beginning of a sprint. They were doing 4-week sprints at a time. They would expect an iteration of an implementation in 1 week. They'd come back and check it and tune it. Iteration second week, check it and tune it. Iteration third week, check it and tune it. And hopefully it was good enough to go live then, if not, minor tuning. So in that case, and this is a really large implementation, the design experts were separate from the teams, but as soon as they came in with the design, they worked with the teams to deliver it in an iterative way.
So did I understand you right, that you're saying that it was more a prototype, just to see for the product owner, hey, this is how it looks like, is this right? And then you're iterating over the prototype, and as soon as the product owner gives the okay, the development team goes over and really does the implementation.
Yeah, it depends on, obviously, the situation. What we found in the venture group with expansion stage startups is that if we don't have at least a wireframe of the web view, it can cut the velocity of the team by in a third.
Wow.
The team will go into a spin. They'll go into a churn because they don't know exactly how it should look. And so they're coming back to the product owner who doesn't like it, and they just get into all these back and forth. So our investors are like, product owners, you gotta give these guys at least a wireframe. And if you're in an application where design really counts, like Apple is with the iPhone, you need a lot more expertise than just a wireframe. So it depends. So we're not talking about big upfront design. We're talking about the product owner team pulling in design expertise to get the job done in a way that they win in the market. And that's a lot more design than most people do. We don't realize how much pain. I mean, just the banks. I worked in the banking industry many years. We come up with a teller system. We put it into the bank. There's thousands of people every day spending 8 hours a day using it, and it totally sucks. It's totally painful. It's a miserable existence. But the people use it. They can't push back. They're just lowly clerks. So even if we won't do it to make more money, we should at least do it out of respect for the people that we're inflicting our products on. And that means we got to get in there and find out how can we make their lives easier.
I think it's important too, like we were discussing, Jens was discussing whether it should be, the design should be part of ready or part of done. And usually part of ready is also the invest criteria, and in this context I think the N is important and negotiable. And the danger I see of having a wireframe as part of the ready is like you make it less negotiable. If it says there like I need this column in some GUI, if the developers just take that as a given and they spend 80% of the development time like producing that column because calculating those figures is really hard, they must understand that they're still in the position where they can go like, okay, this column, that's really expensive. Can we like do it in 20% of the time and then leave that column out?
Let me talk about a totally different example, because to show you the breadth of ways that this is done. In Norway, the Norwegian Post Office started buying up company after company. Anybody that ships anything, they bought. So to ship your motorcycle takes a different kind of postage than sending a letter, okay? And when people went to the website, it was really hard, if I want to ship a car, how do I find on their website, wade through all the package shipments to get to, I want to ship my car. And it was taking them on the average 4 or 5 minutes for a user to get to the right place, which was losing them business. So they actually hired an external expert to come in as product owner, Tom Gilb's son, Kai Gilb. And when he came in, he used the team to do the innovation and prototyping. he said to the team, the goal is the user can get to the right solution and buy postage in 45 seconds. Today it takes 4 minutes. At the end of this sprint, I want 8 different ways to do that. And then the team went and implemented it. Then he looked at each way and he said, okay, what's it going to cost to implement? He looked at the value, you know, the speed, the look and feel. He did a return on investment calculation, and then he selected, okay, this way is the one we're going to implement. But now he's got the fully fleshed out prototype for the team to actually do the final coding. So it's not that the team doesn't get to participate in this whole process, but it's still the same process. They did set-based concurrent engineering to get to the right implementation and then implement.
You want to say something as well?
I just work for a very small company, and it's not interesting what I can say about our own experience. But I did do some research, for example, on Facebook, and you may find it interesting that Facebook, first of all, works in a very Scrum-like way. They have very small teams, and they're empowered and everything. And these teams have various roles. They have engineers, they have data scientists, and they look at the user statistics and so on. And they do have designers on the team. It's a very important part of development at Facebook. And I don't know how they do it, but a frequent recommendation is that designers work like at least one sprint ahead. And they prepare things that will be developed in the future. But then they also support the team while they are implementing things. They are there too, and they're always talking with each other. And another thing I wanted to mention is, I've never really worked in a proper waterfall way, but as I take it, the time you get feedback in waterfall is in beta testing. And then perhaps it's just early enough to fix the most important bugs. You can't really change anything important. What people like Marty Kagan recommend is that you get user feedback even before you start developing. Now that's a difference. Another thing is, in waterfall, as I understand it, you have a separate requirements phase and design phase, and then an engineering phase and a test phase. And Marty Kagan, for example, strongly recommends to put design and requirements together. You can't really separate that. It's the user experience, the product really. The designer has a lot to say on requirements. And then of course development and testing. That's the the agile standard now, that you develop tests together with the code, and at the end you can automate an automated response whether the code is correct or not. And then Marty Kagan speaks of a product discovery team that consists of the product manager. And when he says product manager, you can really insert product owner. The way he understands the product manager role, that's really the product owner role. You can even take his book, Inspired, and read it like the Bible on the product owner role. It's that close. So you have the product owner, the product manager, and then you have the interaction designer, and then you have the lead engineer. He thinks these 3 roles are really necessary to define a product or feature. They're necessary because the product manager has to be the expert on value. Does it make sense for the company to develop this feature or this product? And the interaction designer has to figure out if this can be made usable. It's no good if it's valuable in theory, but nobody can use it, and you can't sell it. And then the lead engineer, he knows the architecture, and he can say if it's feasible. Is a good idea based on the architecture we have been developing the last 10 years or something like this. Or perhaps there are changes necessary, but the feature is so important that we just have to do it, but it will take a year, and we have to stop doing other things. And this input is extremely important. So at this design phase, you already have several roles. But the product manager, product owner, owns this part. And then who comes up with the ideas? When I heard about that, and I must admit, when I read Jeff's blog post about that, this enabling specification and so on, I was initially a bit, I didn't really like it either. I felt, I want to participate and I want to have a say in this and so on. But then, first of all, if you as an engineer feel so strongly about the success of your product, perhaps you should consider becoming a product owner. That's one thing. And the other thing is, who comes up with the cool ideas? The product owners probably are more senior, and the developers tend to be younger, and they know all the latest tech. And who knows what has just become possible, what cool things have just become possible? It's usually the engineers. So Marty Kagan says, although the product manager owns this, he has the last say, many of the most innovative ideas actually come from the developers. So you do want to pull them into this and have them, you want to put them in front of users and see if they have good ideas. But it's still worthwhile to think through the design and test it before you start writing production code.
Okay.
I think Jens brought up an interesting point that who's deciding about the design itself. I think Marty Kagan is more about saying, let the market decide. And I think from you, Jeff, I heard that the product owner is deciding, we're going with this design. And I like both ideas, but maybe it's because of the difference of the product. But like Facebook does it, or eBay, or these web companies, they are just throwing something on the market, A/B testing, and then the market decides.
Oh, sorry, but they don't do just that. I mean, if you think of the profile page, the design of the new profile page, this timeline, probably most of you are familiar with that. I mean, you can't A/B test your way to such a design. These big changes, you can bet they have been working on that for a year at least.
They could probably do it internal. I don't know.
Okay. I think we want to go on to the next question. Is that okay? So, empowerment of a Scrum Master or team. Like, what are they allowed to? Yeah, I really like this.
Okay. The Scrum Master has to have a changing personality depending on the team. If the team doesn't know what they're doing, they're not self-organized, it's not happening, the Scrum Master needs to be forceful. And in shock therapy, he's a dictator. Yeah. This is bad?
Yeah.
Sorry. I thought that was one of the good ones. There's a paper on shock therapy, and we just published this month, it's going into a conference in January, a follow-on paper on hyperproductive metrics. So both of these two are really useful. And you can get this on, if you go to my blog, scrum.jeffsutherland.com, and click on the link to papers, Jeff Sutherland papers. You can go right to the shock therapy paper. I don't know if the hyperproductive metrics one is up there yet, but if it isn't, send me an email. Now, what we train in the course is we want the Scrum Master to be a facilitator. A facilitator leader, a servant leader. But that means that the team has to be functional. You know, if the velocity of the team is like 10% or less of what it should be, and the team is not working, then you just can't let that go on forever. So one of the things that we see, some of the best Scrum coaches are our best Scrum Masters, so you can watch what they do. If you throw them in, you say, hey, you be the Scrum Master for a while, watch what they do. Their personality will change depending on where the team is. So here you get like the average team, which is about, 50% of their capability or less. Now when that team really peaks out at 100%, we know that what that is. It's about 15 function points per developer month. What's the Scrum Master doing there? Nothing. Other than watching, it's like a high-performance airplane, watching that airplane. And if it starts to falter, just coming in and giving it a nudge. Because if you don't watch it, it can go in very fast. So, in my view, you need to empower the Scrum Master to do what needs to be done and work with them while always coaching them to move with the team into a facilitator mode, servant leader mode, and as the team really spins up, backing off more and more with very subtle control.
Maybe you can quickly mention Shuhari in this context. I think it fits.
Yeah, I think Shuhari is a good example. In the Shu state, the team are beginners, and it's like you go into study of martial arts. We had a karate expert in my class in Amsterdam earlier this week, and I said, what happens if you're a new guy in the karate dojo and you don't do what the master says? And he says, you get hurt. Okay, so karate, they don't mess around. They just whack you. In other martial arts, they're a little more flexible. So that's the Shu state. You need to get the basic principles of Scrum as laid out in the Scrum Guide and in the Scrum Primers that we've been talking about, implemented. The facilitator is in the Ha state. As you practice martial arts, maybe you get a belt or two. Now you're executing the movements well. Now you can start developing your own style. In the Shu state in Scrum, you need to be, you want to establish a baseline velocity. You want to have a clear definition of done and ready. And you want the team to be at a sustainable pace. And using the retrospective for process improvement. That's the baseline. Most of the new teams I work with here in Switzerland, they don't even know their velocity. So they're not even in a Shu state yet. So if they were practicing martial arts, they get whacked. Okay, so a good Scrum Master will whack them. Like, we can't have this. We can't be messing around and as unprofessional as this to not even know what we're doing, okay? Yeah.
And I'd like to add something, because I think a lot of these people don't get this point as well now. You can compare it to martial arts as well, because what you do there actually is for years, you just train basics.
Yes.
Again and again and again. And when you do that, you know you will also do. I think the problem is that people really don't get that. They think like after 6 months they are like Scrum, heroes or
right.
specialists, and that's still the beginning,
Yeah.
It's a mental change, and that takes a long time. It's not just applying, like going by the rules. Well, actually, if you go by the rules, then you'll start learning. But yeah, I see. The original question was about self-organizing. I see that a lot. People hear, okay, we're self-organizing. Does that mean we can do whatever we like? And they actually take this Scrum and try to mold it back to what they had before.
It's about the values. I'm a black belt myself, so I know about 2 years being organized is really good. And it's what you're learning actually are values. and you don't learn values. It's like with children, you don't learn that just in half a year.
So in the Haas state, in Scrum, done means tested, integration testing. Ready means good user stories. I think in the people we had here today, about over half of them were doing Scrum already. None of them had good user stories. So that tells you right away. They have data that shows velocity has at least doubled. So these are really clear. This is not rocket science. You can just ask them, are the user stories good? They'll say no. Well, clearly you're in a beginner state of the implementation with that. In the restate, your velocity has improved at least 400%. And the value of shock therapy is that in both Scott Downey's experience, who's the co-author, my experience, and a CTO of a Swedish company, our experience is universal. Well-implemented shock therapy always gets you over 400%, and always in less than 10 sprints. It's guaranteed. Yeah?
Can you explain what this shock therapy is about?
Well, the idea came, with Scott Downey at MySpace, which had all kinds of terrible problems. And eventually, when they got new management in, they got a waterfall CTO who banned Scrum. And then, of course, the company spiraled in. I think they may exist, but they only have a few developers. But what Scott found in that environment is, as they booted up an Agile team, they had no idea what Agile meant. They could argue for 3 weeks about the format of a Scrum board. I mean, it made no sense. So he said, okay, new team that knows nothing about Agile. Okay, it's like you're in the dojo for the first time, and here's the Scrum board. That's the format. There's going to be no arguments. Here's the daily meeting. It's no more than 15 minutes. And here are the 3 questions. And actually, he added a 4th question. The question that everybody has to answer is, what did you do to get the first story on the Scrum board done yesterday? We don't want to hear about anything else, because nothing else matters. If that first one is not done, what are you going to do? Everyone has to speak to get it done today, because the team performance is going to depend on driving the top of the board to testing as fast as possible and systematically working that down. And so in the daily meeting, he'll let the team pull. Actually, when he starts off the first week, he doesn't even let them pull the story. He might ask them, what story do you think you should do? And they start picking the wrong one. He said, no. Why is that the wrong one? He's kind of a Socratic questioner. That is absolutely the wrong one. You tell me why it's wrong. And he'll just work with the team, and then he will pull it himself after the discussion. And this all happens for the first week. And they hate him. Now, in the first week, if they are starting to get the idea of how it works, the next week he steps back and lets them start pulling the stories. Still the same questions. And his goal is, by the 3rd sprint, they've at least doubled velocity. So by the 3rd sprint, they've hit the Haas state. Then he moves to facilitator mode. So it's only rigid at the beginning. And Scott is a big, bear, kind of friendly, laughing guy, but he doesn't tolerate any nonsense. And so he's very good at getting this team motored up, okay? So, you know, you might try it, see if it works for you. What he's found, though, is that he has never seen a Scrum Master been able to get to a Haas state in 3 weeks if the Scrum Master did not put the team first. It's all about the team. It's not about the Scrum Master looking good. It's not about the Scrum Master getting promoted. It's not about whatever their motivation is. It's all about the team being great. And that, you know, it's just like we showed a picture of the All Blacks coach, All Blacks rugby team. You know, and he says, for 25 years, what gets me off is the team is great. So everything I do every day is to figure out how to help them, you know, win the Rugby World Cup. And I am only successful when they are outstanding athletes. And they feel that, and they will perform as a result. So there are subtle personal dynamics in team formation that great Scrum Masters understand. It's a personal thing. It's a personal integrity thing. Yeah?
What about the art of the possible? I remember reading in Ken's book about a company where he failed, where he did something similar like shock therapy. And in my last position, I was doing guerrilla Scrum at the start, and then we implemented Scrum, and it showed all the difficulties and problems, and in the end we had to stop the project and sell the department I was working in. So what if that doesn't work?
Well, in your specific case, what caused it not to work? In the case you're talking about where you were trying to implement it, it didn't work, what caused the failure?
Yeah, management.
Management.
Strong belief that change is bad, and so on. You know.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't implement. If management does not want to improve the company by changing, it's a really bad idea to implement Scrum, because you're going to make everybody miserable. The management's going to be angry, and the people are going to be totally demotivated and depressed. So you would never want to implement Scrum in that environment.
That's the only way that company will survive. They are trying now, but...
See, I say, of course, I work with a venture group. They say, Jeff, don't work with any of these companies like that. Our goal is to put them out of business as fast as possible. And you're just prolonging their misery. The market will take care of them, okay? And it's getting harder and harder to survive. The global speed is accelerating. So the market's going to take care of all these managers that don't want to improve. It's going to be game over for them. And what I recommend, I remember my wife implemented Scrum in churches, and I would recommend this even in the church, and even stronger in an IT organization. When the management turns bad, get out of there. That church is going to fail. You're going to wind up in an absolutely miserable state. You'll have trouble getting another job because of what happened in that place. Get out of there while the getting is good.
Yeah, it says MySpace on your CV. You won't get
Yeah, MySpace is a good example. As soon as they banned Scrum, everybody bailed. Yeah.
Those that didn't have it on their CV.
Yeah, and they removed it from the CV, yeah.
Okay, can we tick that one off? Okay. So I think actually Jens to some extent already asked this question. It's like interaction design, is he part of the team? He said clearly yes. He is part of the team. Is there more to add to that?
Well, what I heard is that he's part of the team, but also part of another team that prepares the design for later sprints. So what is the other team?
Marty Kagan calls that the product discovery team. But there's one person, like the lead engineer, who has two hats. he is part of the engineering team, the implementation team. He's also member of the product discovery team. And well, you can extend that. You have these two teams, but maybe you want it to be everybody's job to discover good ideas. And maybe you can have, like Facebook, you can have hackathons where everybody can just, code something in one night, something cool, and then they can present it, and then Mark Zuckerberg says, oh yes, let's do it. And that becomes the next great thing. Everybody can come to that.
I mean, you see that in the last year, and then Google, they started, you see more and more companies doing this, like everybody can, they get some spare time and work time, but they can do whatever project they like and present that at the end, yeah. Okay, let's consider that one done. How to get out of ScrumBut would be the next one. Well, you know what you watch?
I think this would be the last question.
Okay, that's okay. We'll make it the last question. Good?
You want to talk about that, or you want me to?
No, you go ahead.
Well, for the last 3 years, I've been working with the Scrum Patterns community to try to capture the magic of making Scrum teams work in patterns. The great thing about pattern is you can do them or not do them. It's totally voluntary. They're designed to solve specific problems, and they have to have proven to have been worked in at least 3 different companies. And they are framed with a context. So in this kind of situation, this strategy is a good one. And they have to go through, they have to be workshopped by experts. All around, experts from all over the world go through your pattern and shred it. And they may shred it multiple times before it can be published. And it usually takes at least a year, sometimes 2 or 3 years, to get a pattern through the process. So these things are really well reviewed. So I've been working on what are the key points where the Scrum Master can apply pressure, slight pressure, and it causes the team to excel. So the first pattern that the team needs to work on is the teams need to be stable. If you don't have a stable team, it's very hard to get anything done well. Team performance depends on teams learning how to work together. And if you're constantly changing people on the team, the performance just stays low. So that will be the primary impediment of a Scrum Master. Try to figure out how to fix that. And if you're in one of these companies where the management wants to change the entire team every sprint, as there are, I know a big bank that did that. The managers thought Scrum was great. They could change people at every sprint. Then I recommend you get out of there. You know, there are 424,000 open Scrum jobs in the United States. And we hire people from all over the world. So there's plenty of jobs out there. So get a stable team. Now, once you get a stable team, you need to get the sprint planning problem solved. And you need to, the pattern that we want to use is yesterday's weather. I see so many teams when they're starting off struggling what to bring into the sprint, and then they bring in too much and they fail. And they could do that every sprint for a year. And that creates endless misery. The team it's like a soccer team that loses every single game for the year. It's just depressing. So the Scrum Master has to figure out how to get the team to pull the right stuff in. And by simply implementing the pattern called yesterday's weather as part of the Scrum process, they can only take what they did last sprint or the average of the last 3 sprints into this sprint. And it automatically sets them up for success. It counterbalances to set them up for success. And that's not hard to do. Now, once they're into the sprint, then here's a little more difficult situation. You've got to get the developers fixing their bugs the same day they're found. There's a pattern called daily clean code. If you can do that, then they'll get to the end. The stories they work on at the end of the sprint will actually work at the end. They'll be done. They need to have been estimated in points. It's presumed that they're actually doing some estimation. They'll be done, and they'll have the number of points done, and they will have a velocity. Yeah?
The bugs you're talking about, are these bugs in code implemented in the current sprint, or bugs discovered?
Yeah, there's three main types of bugs. One that are pre-existing, which need to come in as stories, really. Ones that come in while you're in the sprint, customer went down. And the ones that are created by stories you're writing. These are the ones I'm talking about. The stories you're writing have bugs. It really means they're not defects, it's just not done. So it needs to be fixed right away. And if you can do it in less than a day, we know that the team gets a significant acceleration. Well, the velocity will double if they're that fast at fixing bugs. And I don't have time to go through all 8 patterns that set up a Scrum Master for success. But there are these simple patterns that are like pressure points. That in martial arts, I've seen martial arts experts that have been working at the casino at night. Somebody gets upset, is going to start a fight, hit him somebody with a bottle. They come up and they tap him on the shoulder. When the guy turns, they pinch him in the neck, and the guy goes unconscious. Okay? So a good Scrum Master sees teams malfunctioning. Just says, well, we're just going to try yesterday's weather, a little pinch. But it has to be a forceful pinch. You cannot let them wiggle away from it. Okay? You have to make sure it happens, but it's just a pinch. It's just a little thing. And then you start putting pressure on fixing the bugs. And you need to be like, you're a cross between a captain and a coach, you know. I remember I've coached many teams. I remember a ski team, okay. Winning, I had a champion ski team. Okay, so the team would come down. And I would say, well, how did it go today? And they would say, well, it was great. I didn't fall down once. And I remember a day when the whole team said that. Great day, none of us fell down once. And I said, that's horrible, we're going to lose the championship. Nobody's pushing themselves hard enough to fail and figuring out how to get better. And so sometimes you have to be emotional as a Scrum Master. Like, things are like just so upsetting, you can't stand it. And it puts the team into enough emotional pain that they'll try to make you feel better. Okay, we'll fix the bugs today. Okay, just calm down. These daily meetings are getting out of hand. It's kind of the next step after shock therapy. You kind of move out of the dictator stage, but now they're reverting. So then you start to act a little crazy, like, how could this be, So all of these things, there are 8 patterns, and I think, and they're really simple to understand, and if a Scrum Master will implement them, they're guaranteed to bust out a ScrumBut and have a really good team, and in many cases a great team. So I think we've really figured this out.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Is that it? Thank you.